The night on Outpost 9 was cold and silent. The desert winds whispered against metal walls, carrying the dry dust of a lonely planet. John Hale sat by his heater, staring at a half-empty glass. He had not spoken to another person in weeks. The stars above this world never looked friendly to him. They were reminders of places he wished to forget. Then, through the howling wind, he heard something strange. A sound that didn't belong here. It was soft at first, like a cry, broken and trembling. A child's cry. John froze. There were no children on this planet. Only miners, soldiers, and broken men like him. He stood up, reached for his blaster, and walked to the door. When it opened, a rush of icy wind hit his face, and there, in the pale blue light of the moons, stood an alien woman. Her clothes were torn, her silver skin covered in dust, and in her arms, she held a small child wrapped in thin cloth. The child was quiet now, watching John with wide eyes that glowed like twin moons, soft, pale, and alive. For a moment, John couldn't move. His heart began to pound in his chest. Those eyes, he had seen them before, long ago on the battlefield. "Please," the woman said, her voice shaking. "We need shelter. Just for tonight." John looked past her. No ship, no transport, just the endless desert. Whoever she was, she had walked a long way. He should have said no. Company meant trouble, and trouble was something he avoided. But those glowing eyes, they made him feel something he had buried years ago. "Come in," he said quietly. Inside, the warmth made the woman's shoulders relax. She looked around the small metal cabin. Tools on the wall, a small kitchen, one chair, one bed. John lived like a man who expected to leave any day but never did. The child made a small sound. The woman hushed her gently. "My name is Lyra," she said after a while. "From the Cathari people." John nodded slowly. "John Hale, human." She gave a weak smile. "I know." He poured water into a cup and handed it to her. She drank slowly, watching him the way a cornered animal watches a stranger, grateful but ready to run. "You're far from any settlement," he said. "How did you end up here?" Lyra looked down. The ship was attacked. "My husband didn't make it." Her voice trembled. "We've been walking for 2 days." John said nothing. He had seen too many faces like hers before, the faces of war, loss, and survival. After a moment, she spoke again, almost whispering. "I can work. I can cook, clean. I just need a place for my child to rest." John studied her. A part of him wanted to send her away, but another part, something buried under years of guilt, wouldn't let him. "Fine," he said finally. "You can stay. There's work to do around here." Lyra's eyes softened. "Thank you, John Hale." The next morning, the outpost smelled different. For the first time in months, there was the scent of real food. Lyra moved quietly through the small kitchen, her long silver hands cutting and stirring with care. John watched from the doorway. "You've done this before," he said. "In better days?" She replied softly. "Before the war." John looked away. The word war still hit like a bullet. He didn't ask which war, he already knew. Humans and Cathari had fought for years over the same worlds, and he had been part of it. As they ate, the child, Nye, Lyra had called her, played on the floor with a piece of metal. She laughed when John dropped his spoon, her tiny hands clapping. It was a sound John hadn't heard in years. Then something strange happened. The lights above flickered. The heater hummed louder. The control panel beeped without reason. John frowned. "Power surge?" Lyra looked up nervously. "It happens sometimes." "When she laughs," John's eyes widened. "When she laughs?" Lyra nodded, hugging the child protectively. "She is different." Nye looked up at John again. Her glowing eyes caught the light, shining brighter now, almost alive. For a moment he felt dizzy, as if the room spun around him. And then he saw it. A flash in his mind. Fire. Smoke. Soldiers running through the ruins of a Cathari city. Screams. The sky burning red. And among the chaos, those same glowing eyes looking back at him through the smoke. John gasped and stumbled backward. The vision vanished. The child was still sitting there, watching him quietly. What was that?" he muttered. Lyra held her daughter close. "She sees things sometimes, and sometimes others see through her." John stared at the child, his breath heavy. His heart was pounding again. He didn't believe in ghosts or spirits, but what he had just seen was more real than any nightmare. He turned away quickly, gripping the edge of the table to steady himself. "Your daughter," he began, his voice unsteady. "She's not just a child, is she?" Lyra didn't answer. She only whispered, "She remembers things she should not remember." The room fell silent. Outside, the wind howled again, shaking the walls. John felt cold sweat on his neck. He looked once more at the baby, those shining eyes staring right into him, calm and knowing. And in that quiet moment, he felt something deep inside himself tremble. Something he thought had died long ago. The past, the faces, the guilt. The baby blinked once, and in that tiny movement, John saw a reflection of his own buried soul. He whispered to himself, almost afraid of the truth. "What are you, little one?" The baby smiled. And somewhere deep in his mind, John heard a soft whisper, clear as day. "You were there when it burned." The night after Lyra and her child arrived, John couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw those glowing eyes again, soft, round, innocent, and yet ancient. He sat alone in the dark, staring at the small cabin where Lyra slept with her baby. The silence of Outpost 9 felt heavier than ever. It was as if the wind itself was holding its breath. John ran a hand over his chest, feeling the faint outline of an old implant under his skin. It hadn't activated in years, not since the war ended. It was dead, just like the soldier he used to be, or so he thought. Because when the baby had laughed earlier that day, the implant had burned. A sharp sting, like lightning under the skin. That wasn't normal. That wasn't possible. He told himself it was a glitch. But deep inside, he knew better. Something about that child wasn't natural. Morning came quiet and cold. Lyra was already awake, cooking something warm. The smell of spices filled the small room. She smiled when John entered, her silver eyes gentle but tired. "Sleep well?" she asked softly. John didn't answer. He sat down, rubbing his temples. "The baby. What is she?" Lyra hesitated. "Her name is Nye." "I know her name," John said, his voice low. "I'm asking what she is." Lyra looked down at her hands. "She's my daughter." "That's all that matters," John shook his head. "Machines don't react to normal babies. My implant hasn't worked in years. Yesterday it lit up because of her." At that moment, the small child crawled out from behind a crate, clutching a shiny bolt in her hand. When she saw John, she giggled and reached for him. The air shimmered faintly, like heat over sand. Every tool in the room rattled. The lights blinked. And the implant under John's skin pulsed again, bright, alive, and painful. He jumped to his feet, his jaw tight. "You see that?" "She's doing it again." Lyra stood up fast, holding the child close. "Please don't shout. She doesn't mean harm." John took a step back, his heart pounding. "Doesn't mean harm? She's a damn power surge walking around in diapers." The baby looked at him with those glowing eyes again. And just like before, the world around him blurred. He was no longer in the cabin. He was standing on red soil under a burning sky. The smell of smoke filled his nose. Screams echoed in his ears. He saw soldiers, human soldiers, firing into the dark. He saw the faces of the Cathari, terrified and running. And then he saw himself. Armor stained with dust and blood, shouting orders, shooting without looking. He saw the fire fall from the sky, burning the city to ash. Then, suddenly, he was back in the cabin. His hands were shaking. His chest hurt. The child was staring up at him, calm and quiet. John staggered backward until he hit the wall. "What did she do to me?" he whispered. Lyra's eyes were wet. "She didn't do anything. You saw what's inside you. She only showed you what she remembers." "Remembers," John said, almost shouting. "She wasn't even born during the war." Lyra held the baby close. The Cathari believe that some children are born with echoes of the lost. Nye's father died when the city burned. Maybe she carries his memories or the memories of all who died there. John stared at the floor, breathing hard. "That's impossible," Lyra whispered. "Then how do you explain what you saw?" Hours passed in silence. John sat outside looking at the twin moons hanging low over the horizon. The desert stretched forever, glowing faintly in the light. He could hear Lyra humming softly inside the cabin, putting Nye to sleep. The sound was peaceful, almost human. John closed his eyes. He wanted to believe this was just some strange alien trick, hallucinations caused by fatigue or stress. But deep down he knew it wasn't. Those weren't random visions. They were memories. His memories. And hers. He remembered every building he burned, every scream, every face he never looked at twice. Now those faces were looking back through the eyes of a child. Later that night, the heater made a strange sound. John got up to check the power grid. When he opened the panel, he froze. On the small screen was a flickering code, a signal repeating every few seconds. It was military, old, encrypted but familiar. Impossible, he muttered. He traced the signal's origin. It was coming from inside the outpost, from the cabin itself, from the child. He turned sharply. Inside, the baby was awake again, glowing faintly. In the dim light, she was staring at the wall, humming a low tune. Every time she hummed, the power grid pulsed with her rhythm. John's implant buzzed softly, like an echo of her song. Then, in a whisper that wasn't sound but something deeper, inside his mind, he heard it again. You were there when it burned. John's breath caught. He looked down at the little girl, his voice breaking. Who are you, really? The child blinked, then reached out her small hand toward him. For a second, her touch was warm, and he felt a deep sadness that wasn't his own, a sadness older than both of them. Lyra stood behind him, her face pale. She doesn't know, she said quietly. But she remembers everything. John looked at her in silence, the glow from the child's eyes reflecting in his own. Out in the desert, thunder rolled softly in the distance. Though there were no clouds in the sky, something was coming, something that wouldn't let any of them forget. For 3 days, the wind did not stop. It howled across the empty plains like a restless spirit. The sand never settled, and the sky stayed pale and cold, as if the planet itself refused to rest. John Hale could not rest either. Each time he closed his eyes, he saw the same image, fire falling from the sky, the alien city burning, and a child's eyes shining through the smoke. The memory wasn't his alone anymore. It had become shared like a scar cut into 2 souls. He sat at his workbench staring at his trembling hands. The small screen in front of him blinked faintly, still showing that strange signal he had found. It was weak, repeating again and again as if calling out for something. Or someone. He traced the code again. It wasn't just a military frequency. It was an old unit channel, his unit, the one they used during the Ketheri campaign, the one he had tried to forget. John's chest tightened. The implant under his skin pulsed again, glowing faintly blue. No, he muttered. That's impossible. But deep inside, he knew it wasn't. Nothing had been impossible since the day Lyra and her child arrived. Lyra moved quietly around the cabin, pretending not to notice how different John had become. He barely spoke, barely ate. Sometimes she would find him staring at the baby for long minutes, like he was looking at something no one else could see. She wanted to tell him the truth, the whole truth, but she wasn't sure he could bear it. That night, she found him outside, sitting under the cold moons with a small hollow projector flickering beside him. The light showed broken images, soldiers in heavy armor, burning streets, alien civilians running for their lives. And there, among them, was him. Younger, stronger, shouting orders, holding a rifle. John didn't look up when she stepped closer. You knew, didn't you? He said quietly. Lyra froze. Knew what? That I was there. That I helped burn your city. The hollow flickered again, showing explosions reflected in glass towers. Velen 5, John whispered. We called it Operation Dawnfire. I thought we were liberating the place. Turns out we were wiping it clean. Lyra's voice trembled. My husband died that day. John's throat tightened. I know. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The wind blew softly through the metal walls, whispering like voices from far away. Lyra finally said, You remember through guilt. I remembers through blood. She is what the war left behind. John looked at her, his face pale. She's connected to them, isn't she? To the ones who died. Lyra nodded. The Ketheri believed souls travel through memory. Maybe our dead found her. Maybe she carries what we lost. He turned toward the child's sleeping form inside the cabin. The small glow of her eyes flickered under the blanket like stars through fog. Then she's not just your daughter, he said softly. She's a ghost of the battlefield. The following day, John left early, walking toward the signal source. It came from the old ruins half a mile away, an abandoned military relay station buried under sand and time. When he entered, the air smelled of dust and rusted metal. Old banners with faded insignias hung on the walls. His insignias. He walked deeper, flashlight trembling in his hand. The silence inside felt heavy, as if the place remembered every scream it had ever heard. In the control room, he found a terminal still humming faintly. He wiped the screen clean and saw the same signal again, repeating endlessly. He pressed a few keys and a message appeared. Unit Echo 7. Awaiting orders. Status survivors unknown. John stepped back. Echo 7, he whispered. That was his squad. The one he led. The one that vanished after Velen 5 burned. A chill ran through him. They're dead, he said aloud. All of them. But the terminal beeped as if disagreeing. Then a faint sound filled the room, static followed by a voice. Broken, ghostly. John. Hale, he froze. The voice was rough, distant, but it was real. You left us there, the voice said. You left them all. John's knees felt weak. He turned off the terminal, breathing hard. His reflection in the black screen stared back at him. Pale, haunted, older. He whispered, No, you're not real. But as he stepped outside, the wind seemed to carry the voice again, soft and accusing. You were there when it burned. When he returned to the outpost, Lyra was waiting. Her eyes were red as if she had been crying. She saw something, Lyra said quickly. While you were gone, Nye started to glow again. She touched the walls, and I saw through her eyes. I saw you, John, standing in the fire. John couldn't speak. Lyra's voice cracked. I wanted to hate you. I wanted to scream. But when I looked deeper through her, I saw what you saw. Fear, orders, confusion. You didn't know what you were doing. He lowered his head. That doesn't make it right. No, she whispered. But it means you can still change what comes next. John looked at the baby sleeping beside her, glowing faintly like a tiny moon. For the first time, he didn't just see guilt. He saw a chance. A reason. The wind outside howled again, but now it sounded different and like a warning. John turned toward the desert horizon. Red lights blinked faintly in the distance. Ships. The signal hadn't just woken his memories. It had woken something else too, and they were coming. The night sky burned red. Not from fire, but from engines. John Hale stood outside the outpost, his hand over his eyes as the glare of descending ships turned the cold desert into daylight. The hum of the engines was deep, heavy, military class, human. They found us, he whispered. Inside, Lyra clutched Nye close, her body trembling. The baby didn't cry. She just stared at the ceiling, her glowing eyes reflecting the red light. They shouldn't be here, Lyra said softly. They weren't supposed to find us. John didn't answer. He already knew how. That signal from the old relay station, the one he had reactivated, it had been broadcasting his location ever since. He had called them here. The ships landed half a mile away. Dust clouds rolled toward the outpost, wrapping everything in a pale fog. Through it, faint blue lights blinked, human armor lights. John walked to the storage locker and pulled out his old pulse rifle. The weapon felt cold and familiar, like a memory returning from the grave. Lyra stepped forward, her voice shaking. You're not going to fight them? I don't have a choice, he said quietly. They won't come to talk. She looked down at Nye, who was watching him with eyes too calm for a child. They'll take her, she whispered. They'll take her and use her like a machine. John froze, then looked at the baby. What do you mean? Lyra took a breath, tears forming in her eyes. They made her. Your people. They made her kind during the war. Hybrids mixed with Cathari genes. They wanted soldiers who could see through minds, who could remember everything. But when the war ended, they destroyed them all. Nye is the last. John's grip on the rifle tightened. No, I never heard. You didn't hear because they erased it, she said bitterly. You fought in their war, but you never saw what they hid. John stepped closer, his voice low. And you still came to me? Lyra nodded. Because you were the only human who stopped shooting that day. The only one who looked afraid. John stared at her, words lost somewhere between shame and disbelief. Then he looked at Nye. She blinked once and the air shimmered. For a moment, the room vanished. John saw flashes, laboratories filled with children in glass pods, their eyes glowing like stars. Scientists watching, soldiers guarding, and through it all a voice repeating, Memory is the weapon. Memory is control. When he came back to himself, he was shaking. The walls of the outpost flickered like dying light. Lyra whispered, "She showed you. Now you understand." John took a step back. "She's remembering things that aren't hers." Lyra looked at Nye with a strange mix of love and sorrow. "They're not hers alone. She carries everyone's pain. Yours too." The baby turned her head toward John. For the first time, he saw something inside those glowing eyes. Not just light, but reflection. Himself. He fell to one knee, pressing his hand against his chest. The implant under his skin burned like fire. Suddenly, images flooded his mind again. The city burning, the screams, the moment he pulled the trigger that ended everything. But this time, he didn't see it from his eyes. He saw it from theirs. From the ones who had died, their fear, their confusion, their final thought, why? He gasped for air. The child's eyes were glowing brighter now, lighting up the whole room. "Stop," he cried. "Please stop." Lyra grabbed the baby, holding her close. "She's not trying to hurt you. She's trying to make you remember who you are." John dropped the rifle, his breath shaking. "And who's that supposed to be?" Lyra whispered. "The man who didn't finish what he was ordered to do." Outside, a voice called. Through a loudspeaker, "This is Commander Varen of the United Earth Forces. Step out with your hands up. The alien and the child are government property." John's heart stopped. He knew that name, Varen, his old commanding officer. He looked at Lyra. "Take her to the back room. Hide. Don't make a sound." "What will you do?" John looked toward the door, the red light flickering against his face. "I'll give him the same answer I should have given 10 years ago." Lyra hesitated, then nodded. "Be careful, John Hale." As she vanished into the back, the door opened with a hiss. Dust blew in, and figures in black armor stepped through, rifles raised. Varen walked at the front, his gray hair slicked back, his eyes sharp. "It's been a long time, Hale." John lowered his weapon but didn't drop it. "You shouldn't have come." Varen smiled coldly. "You're harboring classified assets. Hand them over and maybe I'll forget this little desert hideout exists." John's jaw tightened. "She's not an asset." "She's a child." Varen's smile faded. "That thing isn't a child. It's a weapon that never should have survived." Before John could answer, a soft light filled the room. Varen stopped mid-step. Behind John, Nye stood in Lyra's arms, glowing so bright her skin seemed made of stars. All power in the room cut out. The soldiers' visors flickered, their comms screamed static. One by one, they dropped their weapons, clutching their heads. John turned. The baby's eyes had changed color, from pale silver to deep gold. And for a moment, John wasn't in the room anymore. He was floating in endless darkness, surrounded by voices, human and alien, whispering, crying, remembering. He saw the faces of his squad. He saw the civilians. He saw Lyra's husband holding a child before the blast took them both. Then he heard her voice, Nye's voice, gentle, echoing in his mind. "You remember now." The vision faded. John fell to his knees, shaking, gasping for air. The soldiers lay unconscious. Varen stared in shock, frozen by fear. John looked at the baby. "What are you showing me?" Lyra's voice was soft, filled with awe and fear. "Not showing, reminding." John looked down at his hands, the same hands that had destroyed, now trembling before the smallest being in the galaxy. And in that moment, he understood. Nye wasn't a weapon. She was a mirror, one that made every soul see the truth they tried to bury. The storm arrived before dawn. Not a storm of wind or rain, but of machines. From the horizon, the desert lit up with crawling lights. Dropships cut through the air, casting long shadows across the sand. Armored vehicles rolled forward, raising clouds of dust that glowed under their floodlights. The human army had come for the child. Inside the outpost, John Hale watched the radar flicker with growing red dots. He counted at least 3 platoons, too many to fight, even for him. He ran a hand down his tired face. The smell of burning circuits still hung in the air from the last attack. The soldiers who had come earlier, Varen's men, now lay unconscious in a storage room, their memories scrambled by Nye's power. John knew it wouldn't stop here. Varen would come back with everything he had. Behind him, Lyra stood by the small window, holding Nye close. The child's golden eyes glowed faintly under the dim light. "They won't stop," Lyra whispered. "They'll burn this world too if they have to." John nodded slowly. They think they're saving humanity. And what do you think? John didn't answer. He stared at the desert instead, a place as empty and broken as the parts of himself he never dared to face. The first strike came just after sunrise. A sonic boom split the sky, shaking the ground beneath them. The old mining towers outside the outpost collapsed in clouds of dust. The shockwave sent every loose object flying across the room. John shielded Lyra and Nye as the ceiling lights shattered. The sound of explosions echoed from every direction. When the dust settled, he looked at Lyra. "We can't stay here. They'll surround us within minutes. Where can we go?" she asked. John opened a hidden panel near the floor. Inside was a small rover, old, dented, but fast enough. "North," he said. "There's a canyon there. The rocks might hide us from scanners." He helped Lyra climb in, then took the driver's seat. The engine sputtered to life and the rover shot into the desert, kicking up a trail of light brown dust. The army moved fast. Drones buzzed overhead, scanning the sand below. The sound of them made Lyra tremble. "John," she said softly, "you can still stop this. Give them Nye, and they'll let you go." He didn't answer right away. His hands gripped the controls tighter. "You think I could do that?" he said finally. Lyra's voice cracked. "You could survive. She and I will be gone anyway." John looked at her sharply. "You don't know what they'll do to her. They'll cut her open, tear her apart just to understand what she is. And you'll die trying to stop them." John's eyes stayed on the road ahead. "Then I'll die for something that matters." For a brief moment, silence filled the small cabin, only the engine and the wind screaming through the vents. Then Nye laughed softly, her tiny hand pressed against the window, reaching for the rising sun. It was strange. In that small sound, everything felt still. The chaos, the fear, the guilt, all quiet for just a heartbeat. John smiled sadly. "She's not afraid." Lyra looked at her daughter. "She doesn't understand fear. Maybe that's her gift. Or maybe it's what we lost," John said quietly. By midday, the canyon came into view, tall cliffs of red rock shining in the heat. They stopped at the base and dragged the rover under a ledge for cover. John stepped out, scanning the sky. He could still hear engines in the distance. The storm wasn't far. Lyra sat beside Nye, wrapping her in a blanket. The child's glow had dimmed, but her eyes still shimmered faintly, reflecting the cliffs around them. "She's tired," Lyra whispered. "Every time she shows something, it drains her." John crouched beside her. "Can she hide it?" "The power?" Lyra shook her head. "It's not power, John, it's truth. She doesn't control it, it calls when it's needed." John looked at the sky again. "Then I guess the truth's about to get loud." The sound of engines grew louder. Dust clouds rose over the canyon edge. Dozens of soldiers appeared above, their armor glinting in the sun. Varen's voice echoed through a loudspeaker again, harsh and cold. "John Hale, you've gone too far. Hand over the alien and the child, or we'll end this the hard way." John shouted back, his voice carrying through the canyon. "You already ended everything the hard way, Varen. You just don't know it yet." Varen's tone turned sharp. "Don't make me kill you, soldier." John laughed bitterly. "You did that years ago." Then he looked at Lyra and whispered, "Stay down." He grabbed his rifle, took a deep breath, and stepped out from the shadow. The battle that followed wasn't like the wars of old. It wasn't loud and glorious. It was small, desperate, human. John moved like a ghost among the rocks, using every trick the military had taught him. He shot down drones, disabled scanners, and forced soldiers to scatter. But there were too many. A blast hit near him, throwing him to the ground. His rifle flew from his hand. His arm burned, bleeding from shrapnel. He heard Varen's boots crunching against stone. "You can't win, Hale. You never could." John looked up, coughing. "You're right," he said weakly. "But she can," Varen frowned. "What?" The air changed. Light spilled from the canyon walls. Not sunlight, but a soft golden glow. Lyra stood at the mouth of the cave, holding Nye. The baby's eyes shone brighter than ever before, reflecting in every soldier's visor. And then, everything stopped. The wind froze. The echoes died. The soldiers stood still, their faces blank, their weapons trembling. Each of them began to see, not through their eyes, but through hers. They saw the war. The fire, the screams. They saw what humanity had done to the Cathari, to themselves. Every hidden truth, every buried sin. One by one, the soldiers dropped their weapons. Varen fell to his knees, his voice trembling. "What is this?" John stepped beside him, his voice calm. "This is what we forgot." As the golden light faded, only silence remained. John turned toward Lyra and Nye. The child was asleep again, her glow fading. But the soldiers were different now. Their eyes no longer burned with anger, only guilt. For the first time in years, John felt the storm quiet inside him too. The canyon was silent after the battle. Smoke hung in the air like a ghost that refused to fade. Weapons lay scattered across the sand, untouched. The human soldiers sat or knelt, heads bowed, eyes wide with disbelief. They had all seen it, every scream, every burning building, every dying face. They had seen what the war had done. Not through John's eyes, not through Lyra's, but through Nye's. And now there was no anger left in them. Only silence. John Hale stood at the center of it all, his armor scorched, his hands trembling. His heart pounded like an echo of old gunfire. He didn't feel like a soldier anymore. He felt like something that had just been born again, and didn't know what to do next. Lyra walked toward him, holding Nye against her chest. The child's golden glow had dimmed to a faint shimmer. Her eyes were half closed, but she was breathing softly, peacefully, almost human. "She saved us," Lyra whispered. John looked around at the soldiers, dazed and broken. "No," he said quietly. "She didn't save us. She showed us." Commander Varen sat against a rock, his face pale and hollow. His helmet was gone, his eyes bloodshot. When he saw John, he didn't raise his weapon. He didn't even move. "I saw them," Varen said weakly. "The Cathari children. The cities we burned, it was us. It was all us," John nodded. "You were there, same as me." Varen shook his head. "We told ourselves it was justice, that we were protecting Earth. But now I remember, those orders weren't about protection. They were about control." John crouched beside him. "You finally see it." Varen looked at Nye. "That child. She carries everything. The memories, the pain. She's dangerous." John's jaw tightened. "Dangerous to people who want to keep lying." Varen didn't answer. He looked away, shame spreading across his face. Lyra stepped closer, her voice calm but sharp. "You wanted to take her apart to understand her. But she's not something to understand. She's something to feel." The commander's lips trembled. "If humanity remembers all of that, we'll never be able to live with ourselves." John stared at him for a long moment. "Then maybe it's time we stop pretending we deserve to." Hours passed. The sun began to fall behind the cliffs, painting the desert in red and gold. The soldiers were quiet. Some cried. Some prayed. None dared to speak of orders or duty anymore. John helped them gather the wounded. No one resisted him now. When the last drone fell silent and the wind began to whisper again, John walked to the canyon's edge. He could see the horizon stretching forever, endless dunes under a fading sky. Lyra joined him. "She's asleep," she said softly. He looked at Nye, who rested peacefully in her arms. "She shouldn't have had to do that," he said. "She's just a child," Lyra smiled sadly. "Maybe children are the only ones who can handle truth without hate." John said nothing. He just watched the sky, where the stars were beginning to appear, the same stars he had once cursed. As night fell, the soldiers began to leave. None of them spoke to John, but every man and woman who passed gave him the same look. Not of hate, not even of guilt, but of understanding. Varen was the last to go. He stopped beside John and said quietly, "You know they'll come again. The higher command won't let this stay buried." John nodded. "Then we'll be ready." Varen hesitated. "If you're lucky. Maybe they'll forget you." John met his gaze. "No, I want them to remember." The commander didn't reply. He just turned away, his boots crunching in the sand until he vanished into the dark. That night, John sat beside the small campfire while Lyra hummed an old Cathari song. Nye slept between them, her tiny hand glowing faintly in the firelight. John stared into the flames. For the first time in years, they didn't look like destruction. They looked alive. "Back in the war," he said slowly, "we used to say memory is a weapon, that if you remember too much, you go insane. But maybe memory's not a weapon at all." Lyra looked at him. "Then what is it?" He smiled faintly. "A cure," she nodded. "That's what Nye carries, the cure for forgetting." Suddenly, Nye stirred in her sleep. The golden light in her eyes flickered, and John felt a pulse in his implant. Gentle this time, not painful. A memory rose in his mind, not from the war, but from years before it. A simple moment, his mother's laughter. The sound of rain on an old window. The warmth of a home that no longer existed. He had forgotten it completely. Until now. He looked at Nye in wonder. She's showing me something new. Lyra smiled softly. Not new, just lost. For a long time, John sat in silence, letting that memory play like a song he hadn't heard in years. It was small, but it filled the emptiness inside him that no weapon ever could. By morning, the horizon glowed with another storm, but this one wasn't human. It was a sandstorm, vast and slow-moving like the planet itself was finally breathing again. John watched it come closer, then turned to Lyra. We can't stay here. There's a settlement west of the mountains, old Ketheri ruins. It might be safe there. Lyra nodded, wrapping Nye in a thick cloth. Wherever we go, she'll keep remembering. John smiled faintly. Then so will we. As they walked away from the canyon, the wind rose behind them, wiping their footprints from the sand. The outpost, the battlefield, the wreckage, all vanished beneath the storm, leaving only silence, but somewhere deep beneath that silence, the memory lived on, carried in the tiny heart of a child who remembered everything humanity tried to forget. The storm passed after 3 days. When the skies cleared, the desert was reborn. The dunes had shifted, covering the ruins of war like a soft burial. The canyon where so many had fallen was gone, erased by the wind, as if the planet itself had chosen to forget. But some things could never be forgotten. John Hale walked ahead, his coat whipping in the cold air, his boots sinking into new sand. The sun glowed weakly above him, pale and distant. Each breath he took felt heavy, but not like before. This time it wasn't guilt weighing him down, it was purpose. Behind him, Lyra carried Nye wrapped in a gray cloth, humming quietly to keep the child calm. The baby's eyes were closed, her glow faint. But every now and then a tiny shimmer of gold peeked through, reminding them she was still there. Still remembering. They were heading west, to the ruins of an old Ketheri city that had once been wiped from maps. A place where the living had stopped going, but the memories had never left. By dusk, they reached it. The city was a skeleton, towers broken, glass turned to dust. The wind whispered through hollow buildings, carrying the echoes of lives long gone. Yet somehow it felt peaceful. The ghosts here didn't cry anymore. They just watched. Lyra stood still for a moment, tears shining in her silver eyes. This was my home, she whispered. Before your armies came. John looked around the ruins. Then it's where we'll start again. She glanced at him, half smiling through her sadness. You think humanity will let us? John looked at the horizon. Let them come. This time, we won't hide. That night they built a small fire in the shell of what had once been a temple. The walls still glowed faintly with ancient carvings, spirals and stars, symbols of life and memory. John sat beside the fire, staring into it as if trying to read his past in the flames. Lyra laid Nye on a folded blanket. The baby stirred, blinking sleepily, her golden eyes catching the firelight. She's stronger, John said softly. Lyra nodded. The more she remembers, the less it hurts her. He smiled faintly. I wish I could say the same. Lyra looked at him carefully. You carry too much, John. You think redemption means punishment, but it doesn't. He looked at her, confused. Then what does it mean? It means choosing to live after the punishment is over. Her words settled deep in him, quiet but sharp. For years, he had thought redemption was about dying the right way, sacrificing himself to make up for what he had done. But now, sitting beside a child who carried the pain of 2 worlds, he realized maybe redemption was about living the right way instead. The wind outside began to howl again, carrying whispers across the ruins. John thought he heard voices in it, faint, soft, familiar. He closed his eyes and listened. The whispers grew clearer. Not words exactly, but feelings. He felt forgiveness. He felt peace. He felt the faces from his past, soldiers, civilians, even enemies, not accusing him anymore but letting go. Then he felt something warm touch his hand. He opened his eyes. Nye had crawled toward him, her small fingers gripping his own. Her eyes glowed brighter now, not gold but soft white. In that moment, John felt the warmth spread through him, a wave of calm that went deeper than any prayer. The implant in his chest pulsed once, then stopped. The war inside him went silent. He looked at Nye, his voice breaking. "Is that you? Showing me again?" The child giggled softly, and in her laughter, he heard the sound of rain. The rain from Earth, from the life he had before all of this. Lyra smiled. "She remembers everything, even what you forgot you loved." John's throat tightened. "She shouldn't carry that weight alone." "She's not alone," Lyra said gently. "She has you now." The next morning a sound echoed from the north. Not weapons, not engines. Just a distant hum of approaching crafts. John climbed a fallen wall and looked up. Small civilian ships? Not soldiers this time. Refugees, settlers, traders, people drawn by signals and rumors of peace. Lyra joined him. "They've come." John nodded. "They'll find us. Will they fight?" He shook his head. "Not after what Nye showed them." Word spreads faster than fire. They watched as the ships descended, kicking up golden dust in the morning light. For the first time, John didn't feel fear. He turned to Lyra. "Maybe this is what comes after war. Not victory, not defeat. Just remembering." Lyra smiled softly. "And forgiveness." Later that day, they walked among the new arrivals, humans and Cathari, standing side by side for the first time in years. There was tension, yes, but also something new in their eyes. Curiosity. Hope. Nye sat on Lyra's shoulder, giggling as she reached for the strangers. Wherever she looked, people seemed to grow quiet, then thoughtful, as if they were seeing something inside themselves they had buried long ago. One old miner knelt before her, tears in his eyes. "I remember my brother," he said softly. "He died in the war. I forgot his face until now." Nye touched his forehead and his tears stopped. John watched, a slow smile spreading across his face. "She's healing them," Lyra nodded. "Memory hurts only when it's locked away. She opens it." John looked at the horizon where the sun dipped low over the sands. The sky burned orange, fading into blue. He felt something deep inside him shift. Not pain, not guilt, but peace. For the first time, he wasn't running from what he'd done. He was walking toward what came next. As night fell, John stood on a high ridge overlooking the rebuilt camp. Fires flickered below like tiny stars. Lyra sat with the others, Nye asleep in her arms. The wind blew softly, cool and calm. John whispered to the stars, "Maybe humanity still has hope." He smiled, faint but real. "And maybe so do I." The stars shimmered brighter, as if answering him. And there, under the vast sky of a healing world, John Hale, the soldier who had once destroyed everything, finally found peace in what he had helped to rebuild. Because redemption, he learned at last, wasn't about forgetting the fire. It was about remembering and choosing to walk through it carrying the light forward.